There's something fascinating about kaiju, those giant monsters that create shockwaves around the globe once they start stomping their feet all over the place. Even the idea of them existing, as well as all the what-ifs about their existence, is something that fans of science fiction cinema are still clinging to after all these years. And all of that is thanks to Ishirō Honda and Eiji Tsuburuya, a duo that sired a subgenre in Japanese sci-fi, which continues to influence many sci-fi movies even today. What once was a genre that made use of the screenwriters' wild imaginations and created visually appealing pieces of art based on superficial what-ifs suddenly started critiquing our society as a whole thanks to the Godzilla franchise. Undeniably, kaiju cinema has influenced a lot of movies, both directly and indirectly. Cloverfield, Kong, Pacific Rim, Pulgasari, etc. But the thing is, people often mistakenly assume that kaiju cinema was started by Godzilla, and that's not exactly accurate. Way before Godzilla, many kaiju films were made by Toho Studios, all of which started this major franchise. At the top of it, the collaboration between Ishirō Honda, a talented director, and Eiji Tsuburuya, an amazing special effects designer, undeniably started a revolution in science fiction cinema. This legendary duo is the reason why Japanese kaiju cinema is still alive and breathing in many modern sci-fi blockbusters involving monstrous entities, even if it's not the 1950s anymore and CGI is more advanced than ever. So yes, dear viewers, tighten your seatbelts as we're going to travel back to the 50s and 60s and talk about 10 brilliant non-Godzilla kaiju films produced by none other than Toho Studios. Are you guys ready? Strap in because it's gonna be a good one. Dogora, 1964. If you spend most of your time scrolling through Pinterest and saving pins related to Japanese movies, both live action and animated, from the early 60s through 80s, then you might know about the film named Dogora. Dogora was something that shaped entire childhoods. It was the first ever kaiju film I saw, and this is the one that introduced me to the Monsterverse because Dogora is kind of a masterpiece. Imagine, a movie in the early 60s and it has this kind of tactile feel that you'll never get to see in today's movies, despite the fact that CGI has been getting better and better, and it's not just because of the nostalgia factor either, it's because the plot of the movie also slaps. Fun fact, Dogora is also produced by Toho Studios. It's created by the same legendary team that made Godzilla, and it's actually directed by Ishirō Honda himself. The special effects are spearheaded by none other than Eiji Tsuburuya himself. He literally used a soft puppet in a water tank to achieve the monster's ethereal floating movements, and that's a big part of why everything in Dogora feels so ahead of its time. The plot, which we already mentioned slaps, literally blends the monster drama with a diamond heist crime drama, which makes the movie worth watching. We watch as a kaiju villain attacks humanity, and also a gang of diamond thieves, aka the International Diamond Robbers, attempt a heist. What's even more interesting is that Dogora might be a commentary on capitalism because we can see that the monster mutates due to radiation and survives by feeding on carbon, due to which humanity faces major loss as it destroys trucks and coal mines and more. Dogora is streaming on the Criterion channel, so if you ever want something really interesting and Japanese to watch, you can play it on your TV, grab some popcorn, and enjoy the show. Mothra, 1961. If you're a Monsterverse fan, you probably already know Mothra, the female moth who had a greater purpose. However, we included this movie among the non-Godzilla kaiju movies because despite the fact that Mothra is a recurring Godzilla character and also made a significant appearance in one of the most iconic battles Godzilla ever engaged in, this movie didn't have a direct correlation with Godzilla, nor was her eventual clash with this messy character even teased. And let me tell you, the original 1961 film rewards you with a much bigger treat if you're a huge fan of whatever Mothra vs. Godzilla was. This one's also directed by Ishirō Honda, and the special effects are delivered by none other than Eiji Tsuburuya, so you can expect great things from this film. I mean, come on, did you ever think you'd go crazy for a moth? Not just a moth, but a giant-sized moth? And what's funny about that is that it becomes one of the most beloved and recurring characters in the Godzilla franchise. To summarize the plot, it follows a joint Japanese-Rolliskian scientific expedition to Infant Island, a secret site previously used for nuclear testing. There, they discover a lush jungle and two twin princesses named the Shobijin. Unfortunately, these two twin princesses are kidnapped by a greedy businessman named Clark Nelson so that he can exploit them as a stage act in Tokyo. This is when the twin princesses use their telepathic power and summon a non-anthropomorphic creature named Mothra, who hatches from a giant egg as a caterpillar, swims to Tokyo, and then, as soon as she takes the shape of a moth, the aftermath of it all is chef's kiss. If you're the sort of person who loves collecting physical media, you can buy the DVD of this film, and of course, watching it through a physical copy will feel like you're actually in the 60s. Trust us, Mothra is a fun ride. We guarantee you'll be thrilled. Rodan, 1956. Our third film is Rodan, and this time we're not in the 60s anymore. We've traveled back to the mid-50s, plus this time, the monster we're talking about is a bug-eating pterodactyl. Wait, how could a bug-eating creature even become a threat to human society? It's a flying monster. What would you even expect? The tagline itself says that it's thundering from the sky. Let's start with a bit of trivia on this one. Rodan is the first ever kaiju film by Toho, which was shot in color. Fans say that this film has some of the best special effects composed by Eiji Tsuburuya, and due to the fact that the plot blends both horror and sci-fi, this movie is a masterpiece which deserves to be preserved in a museum because the film literally opens as a horror thriller set in a mining village where giant prehistoric insects called the Meganulon emerge and kill workers. Is this a reference to workers being tortured in Japanese society? Of course, because nothing is random in the world of kaiju monsters directed by Ishirō Honda. Nevertheless, moving on to what the plot's about, humans investigate the root cause, and this leads them to discover a giant egg, which hatches into Rodan, a flying monster. He causes disturbing shockwaves across the Earth. Fun fact, this movie is indeed named after a singular being. There's no S, no plural, but there are actually two Rodans in the movie. One's male and the other's female, and the two are supposed to mate in this movie so that they can dominate the world. Speaking about the legacy, Rodan became one of the big five kaiju monsters created by Ishirō Honda, and as you probably already know, Rodan also appeared in Godzilla films both as an ally and a rival. Even in the modern blockbuster Godzilla King of the Monsters, Rodan made a significant appearance, and that's why you should put Rodan on your watch list as fast as possible. The War of the Gargantuas, 1966. Our fourth film is a savage beast filled with laboratory experiments, man-eaters, and mountain dwellers. Titled The War of the Gargantuas, this is a loose sequel to Frankenstein Conquers the World, which was released a year prior. But what could be more visually appealing than two giant humanoid monsters, a gentle mountain-dwelling gargantua named Sanda, and a vicious man-eating brother of his called Gaira, brawling against each other? This movie is an absolute classic, plus the plot is quite tragic, given that Sanda and Gaira are brothers. To summarize the plot, from the discarded cells of Sanda, scientists discover the cannibalistic monster Gaira has emerged. Thus, they send the military to knock down the man-eater. However, Sanda intervenes, of course, to save his brother. All of this leads to a tragic conflict that shapes the entire storyline of the film, featuring special effects by Eiji Tsuburuya, blended with an amazing score composed by Akira Ikufube. The War of the Gargantuas is considered a cult classic and has been appreciated by acclaimed directors such as Guillermo del Toro, who would later on make the Pacific Rim movies, which are, of course, an homage to the kaiju mecha concept implemented in the Japanese films. King Kong Escapes, 1967. Our fifth film is about King Kong, one of the most hyped and beloved kaiju of all time. If you've followed the giant ape's career throughout the years, you probably already know that King Kong has a separate franchise dedicated to him, and he steals the spotlight there too. King Kong Escapes, the 1967 kaiju film, is the fourth entry in King Kong's franchise. Unfortunately, the film was met with negative reviews, but then again, some people also praise this movie vehemently because they claim that this movie is the one which has Kong's soul in it. What's even more interesting is that it was based on a Rankin/Bass cartoon named The King Kong Show. As someone who grew up watching Godzilla and King Kong movies, I still remember turning on my TV to watch King Kong Escapes, badly dubbed in English, yet preserving the spirit of the original language. Many years later, as I grew up, I again watched the same film in Japanese with subtitles. I've watched this movie a bunch, and it's safe to say that this is the kind of kaiju film that you never get bored of, regardless of the flaws this movie definitely has. To provide a quick plot overview, this one's about Doctor Who, an evil scientist who creates a robot named Mechanicong to mine a highly radioactive substance called Element X at the North Pole. When the robot fails due to the element's radiation, he abducts the real King Kong from Mondo Island to finish the job. The film's title, King Kong Escapes, is indeed derived from the fact that King Kong eventually escapes from captivity, as he's wont to do, after which comes the most interesting part of the film, the climactic battle between King Kong and Mechanicong, and that too atop the Tokyo Tower. The version of Kong portrayed in this film is about 20 meters tall, so you can imagine how gigantic it is. Either way, I'm willing to bet many of you heard that plot synopsis and thought, hey, that sounds familiar. Maybe I did watch this when I was growing up, and if that's the case, then this is a sign that you should look this film up, because what if you rediscover an old childhood favorite? Varan the Unbelievable, 1958. Our sixth film is an unbelievable Toho kaiju saga, Varan the Unbelievable. And based on that title, you can already speculate how unbelievable this movie was for the people who saw it at the time. I mean, to be fair, the movie has a 27% on Rotten Tomatoes, so from that alone you can speculate how unbelievable the experience actually was. The titular protagonist is actually one of the most iconic and brilliantly written monsters to ever come out of Toho Studios' factory. As one review on Rotten Tomatoes states, only the biggest and most desperate fan of the Godzilla franchise will be able to enjoy this movie. So, if you're a hardcore fan of the Godzilla franchise, consider this movie a special little treat for you, or else there is a chance you might get bored by the end of it. Either way, Varan the Unbelievable is based on a very fascinating concept, even if the plot is paper thin and dead simple. We're introduced to this monster named Varan, a trifibian prehistoric reptile who's capable of swimming, walking on land, and even gliding through the air using membranes between its arms and legs, similar to a flying squirrel. This monster can actually glide at speeds up to Mach 1.5 and also possesses a tough, bumpy ride that's resistant to weapons like bullets and knives. Filmed in black and white, this film was initially planned as a 3-part TV co-production with an American company, but that deal collapsed, so Toho Studios turned it into a theatrical feature. This kind of explains why some things may fall flat in this movie while you watch it, but if you're looking for an obscure Godzilla flick to pass the afternoon, you could do a lot worse. Space Amoeba, 1970. Our seventh film is Space Amoeba, and based on that title, one could forgive you for imagining an amoeba floating through the sky, or since it's a kaiju movie, you might think of a giant sea monster looking like some weird amoeba causing chaos in the human world. These assumptions, as funny as they sound, are sadly not the case, but that is what my friend who knows nothing about Godzilla thought when he first heard this title. First things first, yes, there is an alien amoeba. It hijacks a space probe, and after crash landing on a remote Pacific island, it gives birth to more gigantic monsters like giant squids, crabs, and even turtles. Some moments later, a photographer, a reporter, and an industrial spy arrive on the island with hopes of building a resort there, only to be entrapped in the chaos of these gigantic monsters. The film soon becomes a survival thriller with some horror and sci-fi spice added in. Overall, Space Amoeba is a fun watch for people who love watching survival thrillers, and due to the fact that this film appears as a recurring trope in conventional sci-fi movies, Space Amoeba is cited as a sci-fi horror film, which is definitely worth watching, especially for general audiences. While this isn't exactly the first significant appearance of a space fauna, thanks to flicks like Star Trek and Orion's Arm, for our money, Space Amoeba is one of the most thrilling. Atragon, 1963. Our eighth kaiju film is none other than Atragon, a classic 1963 sci-fi film led by, of course, the legendary duo Ishirō Honda and Eiji Tsuburuya. If you're studying filmmaking, or if you're just someone who's enthusiastic about sci-fi movies, then you might already know that this movie is famous for introducing the Gotengo, a high-tech flying submarine equipped with a massive drill. Ever since its introduction, Gotengo has been one of the most iconic vehicles of all time, especially in the kaiju genre. This 1963 agree, Kaiju film isn't merely a sci-fi movie about vehicles and monsters though, it's much more than that. In Japan, the film was released under the name of Kaitai Gunkin, which translates to undersea warship. You heard that right, friends. This film is about an undersea warship. When the Earth is threatened by the Mu Empire, an ancient undersea civilization that seeks to reclaim the terrestrial world, Gotengo, aka Atragon, a high-tech submarine, arises as humanity's last hope. This film also marks the first appearance of Manda, a giant sea serpent dragon that serves as the guardian of the Mu Empire. Based on the 19th century novels written by Shunro Oshikawa, Atragon is the foundation of what would later become a harbinger of futuristic vehicles standing up for humanity during chaotic battles. Frankenstein vs. Baragon, 1965. Our penultimate non-Godzilla kaiju film is Frankenstein vs. Baragon. Yup, you heard that right. It's Mary Shelley's mythic monster fighting against a subterranean kaiju dinosaur. Released in the US as Frankenstein Conquers the World, this movie introduced Baragon, a dinosaur-like kaiju monster, to Toho's Monsterverse. The film is set around the time of World War II, in a fictional world where Frankenstein actually exists, and Nazis seize the immortal heart of the human monster and send it to Japan. During the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, Frankenstein's heart is exposed to radiation. 15 years after this lethal incident, the irradiated heart of Frankenstein regenerates into a feral Caucasian boy who grows to a height of 20 meters, or approximately 65 feet. However, conflict arises when Frankenstein is wrongly blamed for a large-scale destruction caused by Baragon, who's a gigantic dinosaur-like monster approximately 25 meters high. What forms the crux of the story is Frankenstein eventually protecting his human caretakers from Baragon's threat and thus battling the monster atop Mount Fuji. This monster mishmash was a big hit with sci-fi horror film nerds in the 1960s. What's even more interesting about this film is the character arc of Frankenstein's monster. Initially, he's misunderstood by all the humans because of the bestial rage he unleashes due to the fact he cannot understand the human world. The very human monster later snaps the neck of Baragon and even sacrifices his own life for humanity's sake, which makes this movie quite exceptional. Personally, we found Frankenstein Conquers the World one of the most fun films in the Toho catalog. Blame it on personal bias because we really love this sort of dumb crossover. We would highly recommend this film to anyone who's just getting into kaiju cinema and wants to dive deeper into it, especially pertaining to Toho Studios and their exceptional contributions. Gorath, 1962. The final non-Godzilla kaiju film that we'll be talking about today is another really interesting film from the Toho catalog, and it's none other than Gorath. Named after an asteroid set to destroy the world while humans were battling kaiju monsters, Gorath is unlike all the other movies mentioned here today. It's actually an epic disaster film. The plot of Gorath revolves around this asteroid, which is on a collision course with Earth, and thusly, scientists have to come up with ways to save the planet by moving it out of orbit with the help of special massive thrusters planted at the South Pole. However, only one monster is featured in this film, an obscure, giant, prehistoric walrus-like monstrous entity called Maguma, who's awakened by the heat of the thrusters. In the American print of Gorath, the kaiju part of this movie was removed entirely. Plus, the film also received lots of criticism because of the inclusion of this monster. Actually, there is a reason why this happened. Originally, it wasn't intended, considering that it was actually an epic disaster flick. However, producer Tomoyuki Tanaka urged the director to put this monster in the film, despite him being against it. And due to these creative differences, certain sections of the film turn out to be unforgivably dull despite their efforts. Unlike all the other films where there are monsters clashing with each other and there's some survival thriller going on for the humans, this film comes out as more of a space commentary, with scientists gathering to stop a cosmic threat from obliterating humanity. Even with just one monster, the film still doesn't deter from its spirit, that is, a tale of rocket ships, thrusters, and many other sci-fi innovations. One of our favorite reviews of this film called it the Japanese version of the iconic sci-fi film When Worlds Collide by George Pal. Another fun fact about this movie is that the American print used to have a 6-minute-long prologue about outer space. Unfortunately, as of today, that prologue is missing from all the prints globally and has seemingly disappeared forever. Unfortunately, that's all we got for you today, friends. Do you guys love the Godzilla franchise as much as we do? Do you want us to cover topics related to the kaiju monsters you're most interested in? Let us know in the comments down below because it really helps us figure out what videos to make next. Also, for that same reason, if you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to drop a like and share it with your friends. If you're in the mood for more such marvelous videos, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon to never miss an update. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and we'll see ya in the next one.